Welcome back everyone to another Lawn Fawn video. This is Mindy, and in today's video we are going to be doing some unique ink blending to create our scene today. So I'm going to be using the stamp sets Llama Tell You, Year 10, and some clouds off of the Butterfly Kisses stamp set. I stamped these images onto some Lawn Fawn white cardstock using their jet black ink, which is Copic friendly, and then I'm going to Copic color all of my images. I'm going to use the warm grays to color in my llama. I used W5, W4, W2, and W0 and W00 to do the coloring. So it's a nice warm gray. Once it's combined with the colorful background, it doesn't look so dirty, which sometimes happens when trying to color a white image with warm gray colors. So once I put that to my background, it'll match in really well. I took the W5 and just added little dots to the areas just to provide some texture. For the face, I used E11 and E00. And for the blanket, I'm using BG32 and BG49. And then I did just trace around the edge of the blanket with a pink, and I believe I used the RV14. Now for my cactus, I'm going to be trying something a little different. I was really in the mood to get my coloring on, and this is a huge color blend for me, which I don't normally do. So I have quite a few colors here, and I will list them at the top of the screen if you wanted to try this out. So I'm really working with some major depth when it comes to these colors. I'm going to be using BV29, which I know is super dark and kind of scary, but it really does work well with this image. So BV29, BG49, this is G17. I will also use a G05, a YG06, and a YG00. So I did play around a little bit between the three different cactus images as far as how much of each color to use. I really do like having a lot of depth to my image, and so that's where those two real dark colors came into play. I also found with using this big of an array of colors, I didn't have to go over the image twice, which is typically what I would do to really blend them out. It was really fun to just kind of sit and really put myself into this coloring, add that much depth. And that YG06 and YG00 really helped make the highlight areas pop off of the image. So you can see I kind of played around a little bit on one of the images. I added lines over the center lines that are stamped there on the image. So I kind of played around with it, just blended them out. Like I said, I only went over that once. Going over it twice with this many colors, I found I would bleed just because there is so much ink on the paper. So one time over it really does good with this image, and I did really like the dimension that it provided. So I did color that third one off screen, and then for the flower I am just using I believe it was an RV13 and an RV14, just adding little flicks of that darker color. That might be an RV17, I believe, actually. Once I have all of those images colored, I'll go ahead and line up the coordinating dies, hold them in place with some low tack tape. I'm using some purple tape, but Post-it tape would work just as well. And then I will run this through my die cutting machine, and I will have to go through a couple times so I can cut out all of my cactus images. So here's a quick look at all of those die cut out, and I'll put them off on the side to work on my background. Now this is a really unique color combination that I'm trying out. I kind of got lost on Pinterest looking at different skies, different color combinations for skies for this. And what I landed on was Scattered Straw, which is the first color I laid down there, Wild Honey, Fired Brick, and Dusty Concord. And I really liked these colors together. I didn't start all the way towards the bottom because I am going to have some hills down there. So I knew I didn't need to ink blend that. Now the Dusty Concord, it was nice, but I didn't feel it was giving me enough pop. So I'm going to be bringing in a chipped sapphire, and that really did the trick on this background. Now you can see I'm going back over those areas again just to really help smooth out that blend. That's how you can really get the smooth transition, is by going over them. The more ink that's on the paper when it comes to the oxides, the better your blend is going to be. So here's that chipped sapphire that I added towards the top, and I just really love what that did for my background. And then once again, just going back over with the blending brushes to help smooth that out. Then I'm just taking some clear water and I'm going to spray my background a little bit and dab that up with a paper towel, and that's just going to add a little bit of interest to the background. You could very well just leave it as the evenly blended sky. For my sun, I die cut out some circles using the circle stackables. This one is out of the vanilla malt cardstock, and then the larger one is from some vellum. And to kind of go along with my ink blended background, I'm just adding a little bit of the scattered straw with a smaller life-changing blender brush. So I'm just going around those edges. Now this could also work as a moon too if you wanted, but I'm going for a sunny look for my background. And I didn't think that scattered straw was really doing a lot for me, so I'm going to bring it in with a little bit of the wild honey, and I'm just using what's left over on my brush. I didn't want to have it be real drastic, so just that little bit really added to it. And I'm going to set that off on the side. That'll be the sun for my scene. And now I have some hills that I'm also going to ink blend. So really in an ink blending mood, obviously, here tonight. I die cut these hills. This is using the stitched hillside border, and I ink blended that first with some antique linen. And then I'm going to come in with the Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink, adding a little bit to the top of the hill. And then for the hill that I'm going to have in the front of my card, I did add some of this Vintage Photo just to the bottom of it. So it's going to leave a little bit of a highlight area in the center. For a little of the added interest, once again, I squished down the Vintage Photo onto my craft mat, spritzed it with water, and flicked that onto my background. This also works really well if you're creating a sandy beach. And now I'm taking, this is some Copic white ink that I just recently got. I added a little bit to my craft mat and once again just mixed that with water to flick that onto my background with a paintbrush. I've really been in the search for a nice bright white for my flicks. I find a lot of what I use kind of fades off, and so far this Copic white is really working out well. Now I have the mountain that I created from the stitched mountain, and this is cut out of the paper bag cardstock from Fawn. Once again, wanting to add a little bit of color to it. The brown, the Vintage Photo really wasn't doing it for me, so I brought in that chipped sapphire. And I know it looks kind of odd right now, but once we put it with the background, it just really all pulls in together. So when you're kind of tying in some of those different colors, it just really makes the scene come together nicely. So it's great to experiment with different colors like that for your cardstocks and just adding dimension to your images. I'm going to use my MISTI to stamp a sentiment. I was a little nervous if this was going to work out because that I already added my flicks to this. So I'm just taking that sentiment from the Llama Tell You stamp set, lined that up in the bottom corner, and once it was straight, I just picked it up at the door of my MISTI. So I prepped my cardstock with the anti-static powder tool, stamped it in the clear embossing ink, and I did stamp it twice to make sure I really had some good coverage over that textured background. Then I'll sprinkle on some white embossing powder and heat set that. Now I can start working on creating my scene. I actually had already laid all of this out, so I knew where everything was going to go, and that also had helped me decide where my sentiment was going to fit. Now it's just a matter of adding the adhesive or foam squares to everything and putting that all together. So I did pop up that centerpiece to the sun with some foam squares, added the tape runner to the back of that vellum and attached that to my sky. Now this card is going to be a full 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card front. I added the adhesive to my hills, and I don't push down when I attach my hills. That allows me a little wiggle room to be able to tuck things in and move them around to where I think it's going to fit best. I do sometimes change it up from my original plan, so by not pushing those hills down right away just kind of gives you that freedom to play around a little bit. Now you see here I do have an extra llama. I had colored a second one off screen. So I have 2 llamas there, which I think they are just so super adorable. One of them I forgot to finish coloring the hooves, so I did add that in real quick. And then adding those flowers with the liquid glue to the tops of the cactus, just here and there poking out. And then I'm going to be adding my clouds to the background. And when I'm adding clouds to my scene, I like to have some of them kind of hanging off the edge of the card. I just kind of like how that finishes a scene off. So some of them I am adding a couple of the foam squares onto. The other ones I will just add the tape runner to. And I'll trim that off later. Now, since my sentiment on the front needs to continue, I need to create a card base for this. So I'm just scoring this piece of cardstock to create my own A2 size card base. So that'll be 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, just reinforcing that fold with the bone folder. And then I'm going to add my card front to the front of this. And I will be stamping on the inside. It'd be a lot easier to actually stamp on that before adding the card front, but either way will work. So I'm just quickly trimming off that excess that's overhanging, and then I'm going to use my MISTI, this is the original size MISTI, to stamp the sentiment in the inside. So once I lined that up in the inside of my card, I'll just stamp that with the jet black ink. And I thought it would be really fun to have one of those cactus images in the inside too. So I'm going to put that there, but this time I'm going to stamp it in pizza crust ink. This is just kind of a nice light brown ink, almost looks like a watermark in the inside. And then I'm just taking one of these small acrylic blocks and that pizza crust ink, and I'm stamping on that winking face. And that finishes off the inside of the card. Now, I hope you really enjoyed this. I really had a blast coloring up those images, really taking my time to play with some color combinations between the Copic markers and the ink blending. It's really fun to change up colors, something that you don't normally see, and adding colors you might not really think of before. So I hope you enjoyed it too. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.